On September 4th, 476, Romulus Augustus, the last Roman emperor, was deposed by the barbarian Odoacer. Over 1,000 years after Rome's founding, the empire sprawled across 9 million square miles at its peak, boasting the largest professional army the world had ever known. Despite its immense size, towards the end, Rome was besieged by constant barbarian attacks that gradually eroded its borders. By Romulus's time, little more than Italy remained, while the eastern half of the empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, survived until 1453. The Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, never to rise again. Ultimately, Rome's downfall stemmed from its inability to withstand the continuous invasions and mass migrations of barbarian tribes. The devastating Hunnic incursions in the east pushed many barbarian tribes to seek refuge within the Roman Empire. One such tribe was the Goths, who sought shelter in 376. However, the Romans treated these refugees terribly, offering them no aid when famine struck. Many were forced to sell their children for food, receiving paltry amounts, sometimes no more than dog meat. This mistreatment ignited the Gothic War, in which the oppressed Goths revolted against the Romans. This war proved catastrophic for Rome. The Battle of Adrianople in 378 stands as one of the most devastating defeats in Roman history. Here, the Goths led a rebellion against the Eastern Emperor Valens at Adrianople, located in modern-day Turkey. Valens was utterly overwhelmed, resulting in a massive rout in which 2/3 of the Roman army perished, and the emperor himself was killed. The Gothic War concluded with Emperor Theodosius III, allowing the Goths to settle within the empire. Gothic soldiers were permitted to join the ranks of the Roman army, and their people were allowed to remain together within Roman territory, a previously unheard-of arrangement. Tensions between the Goths and Romans flared up again when Alaric, king of the Visigoths, decided to challenge Rome. Alaric had previously served in the Roman army under Theodosius, but became disillusioned after Theodosius's death when his sons, Honorius and Arcadius, were appointed to rule each half of the empire. The Gothic tribes living among the Romans became known as the Visigoths, meaning Western Goths. Fed up with Roman mistreatment, the Visigoths elected Alaric as their king and marched against the empire. After some success attacking the Eastern Empire, Alaric turned his attention to the much weaker Western Empire. Alaric first besieged Rome in 401, but was repelled by the legendary general Stilicho. Emperor Honorius became increasingly detached from events, moving his capital to Ravenna, near modern-day Venice. In response to Alaric's invasion, then, in 408, Honorius executed Stilicho, the general who had so valiantly defended Rome all those years earlier, leaving the city vulnerable to attack. Alaric returned later that year and besieged Rome, until its starving citizens agreed to pay a huge ransom and install a rival emperor to represent Alaric in negotiations with Honorius. Alaric sought land for his people, but Honorius refused to negotiate, leading Alaric to march on Rome for a third time in 410. This time, he met virtually no resistance and sacked the city for 3 days before marching southward with his spoils. Upon hearing that Rome had perished, Honorius was reportedly distraught, thinking it referred to his favorite chicken named Roma. Upon learning it was the city instead, he was relieved, pleased that his favorite chicken was safe. The sack of Rome was a pivotal moment in the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Signaling that its end was near, the empire succumbed to relentless assaults from numerous barbarian groups, who were able to seize Roman territory and establish several successor kingdoms. A rival emperor named Constantine III rose up against Honorius and managed to seize control of Britannia and Gaul. The Romans in Britannia revolted against Constantine, requesting assistance from Honorius, who refused. However, They managed to expel Constantine's forces without Honorius's help, resulting in Britannia being permanently lost to the empire. Constantine was defeated and executed in 411, but the empire faced further challenges as Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine and pillaged their way across Gaul. Eventually settling in Hispania, the Suebi tribe managed to take over western Hispania and establish the kingdom of the Suebi. Two other tribes, the Vandals and the Alans, led by King Gaiseric, moved south through the Strait of Gibraltar and seized most of North Africa, including the legendary city of Carthage. They eventually managed to seize Sicily and several Mediterranean islands. Establishing the Vandal kingdom, the Visigoths also capitalized on the situation, capturing parts of southern Gaul and allying with Emperor Honorius, who granted them western Gaul in exchange for their help in driving out the barbarians from Hispania. The Visigoths soon turned on their ally and began seizing undefended Roman land before the invasion of Attila. The Hun forced them to once again ally with the empire. Once Attila was successfully repelled, having wreaked havoc across Gaul and decimating large parts of the Roman army, the Visigoths once again attacked their crippled ally, managing to seize the last part of Hispania under Roman control, creating the Visigothic kingdom. At this point, the Western Empire had little left. The senior military commander of the Roman forces, Orestes, deposed his emperor Julius Nepos in 475 and placed his son Romulus on the throne. Simultaneously, the Foederati, the barbarian soldiers in the employment of Rome, sought land within Italy for their service. Orestes refused their demands, and so they turned to Odoacer, an officer in the army. Odoacer led the group against Orestes, successfully killing him before marching against Romulus. Odoacer deposed Romulus but spared his life as the emperor was only 16 years old. Odoacer became the king of Italy, sending the imperial insignia to the Eastern emperor, signifying an end to Rome's imperial power in the West. While barbarian invasions ultimately brought down the empire, the causes of Rome's fall were numerous. Rome faced massive challenges due to the colossal size of its empire. The empire reached its territorial peak in 117 under Emperor Trajan, with its borders stretching from Britain to Syria. This led to many problems, one of which was that communication could take weeks or longer to travel from the frontiers to the capital, making it difficult to manage the administration of distant provinces. It was also impractical to oversee wars in areas such as Syria or Germany from a position in Italy. For these reasons, in 285, Emperor Diocletian decided to divide the empire into a western and eastern half, to be ruled by two different emperors of equal power. This plan saw short-term success, with each half being able to govern its provinces and defend its borders more effectively, but in time, it spelled doom for the Western Empire. The Western Empire began to fall into bankruptcy, as the Eastern Empire contained a majority of the wealthy provinces, while many Western provinces were focused on agriculture and were much poorer. The funds of the Western Empire were also depleted due to constant war. Whether it was barbarians at the gates or internal civil wars, the Western Empire was in an almost continuous state of conflict, and therefore required a very large army. This army heavily burdened the state's budget, leading to the postponement of infrastructure development and civil projects in favor of military expenditure. Rome's economy was also driven by slave labor. After the expansion of Trajan, later emperors acted much more defensively and sometimes lost more land than they gained. This lack of expansion meant that no new people were conquered, and therefore there was no steady supply of slaves to fuel the economy. This caused the economy to collapse, as it could no longer sustain itself. A lack of funds meant the state had much less money to spend on the army, causing a shortage of professional legionaries. Rome's army was once the envy of the ancient world, but the empire was now forced to relax its recruitment criteria in order to defend its borders. Known as federati, barbarian units were allowed into the legions, and foreign mercenaries were hired to support the army. These new soldiers had often never set foot inside Rome and cared little for it. They were loyal to their commanders, their wages, and their people, not the empire, leading many to turn on Rome when it was profitable. Another issue plaguing the empire was ineffective leadership. Many of the later emperors were incredibly out of touch, possibly because the capital was moved away from Rome, first to Milan in 286, and later to Ravenna in 402. Succession often passed to children as well, leading to several incompetent emperors who had only attained the position through birthright. The last emperor, Romulus, was only 16 when he was deposed and provided little resistance to the invading barbarians. The aristocracy grew incredibly powerful due to low taxes, with some acquiring more wealth than the central government. This led them to effectively control weaker emperors who desperately needed their money, with profit taking priority over matters of state. With such a corrupt and ineffective leadership, there is no wonder the population and many of the new barbarian soldiers had little faith in their rulers. It has also been argued that Christianity played a role in the decline of the empire. Christianity was legalized in 313 and became Rome's official religion in 380. The fact that Christianity had a single god was drastically opposed to Roman methods of control. When conquering new land, the Romans would often incorporate local gods into the state religion, allowing them to be worshipped by locals or likening them to an existing deity and merging the two. This was an effective tool of Romanization, slowly integrating the newly conquered into Roman society. Having multiple gods also allowed the Roman emperors to be worshipped as gods, and it was from this that they gained a lot of their legitimacy. The first emperor, Augustus, deified his adopted father, Julius Caesar, and proclaimed himself as the son of a god. Christianity could not allow this, however, leading to the loss of a significant amount of authority for the emperors, and making the process of integrating new people much more difficult. While the empire fell in 476, Rome's legacy lived on far past this day. The empire managed to survive territorially, with the Byzantine Empire keeping the Roman East alive until its fall in 1453 to the Ottomans. The empire even saw a resurgence of sorts in the West, with Charlemagne, king of the Franks, being crowned the Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD. Roman culture has had a tremendous effect on the Western world, with many European languages having their roots in Latin, such as French, Spanish, and Italian. Rome's religion, Latin Christianity, also saw complete dominance over the medieval West, with the Pope serving as a figurehead for all of Europe from his seat in Rome. Roman technology and infrastructure also helped greatly in the development of Europe in the Middle Ages, with many Roman towns still being important today, such as Londinium, the predecessor to London. So, while the empire fell with Romulus, his influence has persisted throughout history, marking it as one of the most impactful empires to have ever existed. And this brings us to the sponsor of the video, The Great Courses Plus. The Great Courses Plus, a world of knowledge, is ready at your fingertips, available anytime on any device. With a subscription, you gain access to lectures from the world's greatest professors and experts, from Neil deGrasse Tyson to National Geographic and the Smithsonian. A subscription gives you unlimited access to a huge library of over 10 videos with lectures ranging from art, science, math, history, business, and many more. If you want to learn how to cook, play chess, or become a better photographer, The Great Courses Plus is the service for you. One course we would highly recommend is The Rise of Rome. This course delves into the early days of the Roman Republic, the unification of the Italian peninsula, the rise of Julius Caesar, and much more. This 24-part lecture series is a must-watch for anyone interested in history, and right now, the Great Courses Plus is offering the Life Guide viewers a free trial. So, what are you waiting for? Visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/the Life Guide. Click on the link in the description and start your free trial today. This video is brought to you with the generous support of the Great Courses Plus. Back in 476 AD, on the 4th of September to be exact, the last Roman emperor, a young man by the name of Romulus Augustus, was ousted from his position of power by Odoacer, a barbarian leader. This event occurred more than a millennium after the city of Rome was initially established. At its zenith, the Roman Empire was a sprawling domain encompassing a vast territory of approximately 9 million square miles. Its military was renowned as the most formidable and professionally organized force the world had ever witnessed. However, despite its immense size and power, as the empire approached its twilight years, it found itself under relentless pressure from barbarian incursions that gradually eroded its frontiers. By the time Romulus ascended to the throne, the empire's dominion had shrunk to encompass little more than the Italian peninsula, while the eastern portion of the empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, managed to endure until the year 1453. The Western Roman Empire ultimately crumbled in the 5th century and never recovered. The ultimate cause of Rome's demise was its inability to effectively resist the persistent waves of invasions and the large-scale migration of barbarian tribes into its territories. The devastating raids conducted by the Huns in the east prompted numerous barbarian tribes to seek refuge within the borders of the Roman Empire. Among these tribes were the Goths, who sought asylum in 376 AD. However, the Romans subjected these refugees to deplorable treatment upon granting them entry into their territory. They provided no assistance when famine struck, forcing many Goths to sell their own children for meager amounts of food, sometimes receiving nothing more than dog meat in return. This mistreatment ignited the Gothic War, during which the oppressed Goths rose up in rebellion against their Roman overlords. This conflict proved to be disastrous for Rome. The Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD stands as one of the most crushing defeats in the annals of Roman history. In this battle, the Goths launched a rebellion against the Eastern Emperor Valens at Adrianople, a city located in modern-day Turkey. Valens was utterly overwhelmed by the Gothic forces, resulting in a massive rout in which 2/3 of the Roman army were annihilated, and the emperor himself met his demise. The Gothic War eventually concluded with Emperor Theodosius I granting the Goths permission to settle within the empire. Gothic soldiers were permitted to enlist in the ranks of the Roman army, and their people were allowed to remain together within Roman territory, a privilege that had never been extended to foreign groups before. Tensions between the Goths and the Romans reignited when Alaric, the king of the Visigoths, decided to take a firm stance against Rome. Alaric had previously served in the Roman army under the command of Theodosius, but grew disillusioned with the Roman regime after Theodosius's passing, when his sons, Honorius and Arcadius, were appointed to govern separate halves of the empire. The Gothic tribes residing among the Romans had come to be known as the Visigoths, a term meaning Western Goths, frustrated by the mistreatment they endured at the hands of the Romans. The Visigoths elected Alaric as their king and initiated a march against the empire. Following a period of moderate success in attacking the Eastern Empire, Alaric shifted his focus towards the significantly weaker Western Empire. Alaric initially laid siege to Rome in 401 AD, but was ultimately repelled by the legendary general Stilicho. Emperor Honorius displayed an increasing detachment from the unfolding events, opting to relocate his capital to Ravenna, a city situated near modern-day Venice, in response to Alaric's invasion. Subsequently, in 408 AD, Honorius ordered the execution of Stilicho, the very general who had valiantly defended Rome for so many years, thereby leaving the city vulnerable to enemy attack. Alaric returned later that same year and subjected Rome to another siege until its starving inhabitants conceded to pay a substantial ransom and install a rival emperor to represent Alaric's interests in negotiations with Honorius. Alaric sought land for his people, but Honorius refused to engage in negotiations, prompting Alaric to march upon Rome for a third time in 410 AD. On this occasion, he encountered virtually no resistance and proceeded to sack the city for a period of 3 days before leading his forces southward with their spoils. Upon receiving news that Rome had fallen, Honorius was reportedly distraught, mistakenly believing the report referred to his beloved pet chicken named Roma. Upon learning that it was the city that had been sacked, he experienced a sense of relief, comforted by the knowledge that his cherished chicken was safe. The sack of Rome constituted a pivotal moment in the decline and fall of the Western Roman Empire, signaling that its end was rapidly approaching. The empire succumbed to relentless assaults from numerous barbarian groups, who successfully seized Roman territory and established a multitude of successor kingdoms in its wake. A rival claimant to the imperial throne, known as Constantine III, emerged in opposition to Honorius and managed to gain control of both Britannia and Gaul. The Romans residing in Britannia revolted against Constantine, appealing to Honorius for assistance. However, Honorius declined to provide support. Nonetheless, the Britons managed to expel Constantine's forces without Honorius's intervention, resulting in Britannia being permanently lost to the empire. Constantine was eventually defeated and executed in 411 AD, but the empire continued to face further challenges as Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine River and embarked on a campaign of pillage and destruction across Gaul. Ultimately establishing settlements in Hispania, the Suebi tribe succeeded in seizing control of western Hispania and establishing the kingdom of the Suebi. Simultaneously, 2 other tribes, the Vandals and the Alans, under the leadership of King Gaiseric, advanced southward through the Strait of Gibraltar and captured the majority of North Africa, including the renowned city of Carthage. These tribes eventually managed to seize control of Sicily and various islands in the Mediterranean, thereby establishing the Vandal kingdom. The Visigoths also capitalized on the prevailing circumstances, capturing portions of southern Gaul and forging an alliance with Emperor Honorius, who granted them control of western Gaul in exchange for their assistance in driving out the barbarian tribes from Hispania. However, the Visigoths soon betrayed their Roman allies and began seizing undefended Roman territories until the invasion of Attila the Hun compelled them to once again align themselves with the empire. Once Attila was successfully repelled, after having sown chaos and devastation across Gaul and decimating large portions of the Roman army, the Visigoths once again attacked their weakened ally, managing to seize the last remaining part of Hispania that was still under Roman control, thereby establishing the Visigothic kingdom. By this juncture, the Western Empire retained very little territory or power. The senior military commander of the Roman forces, Orestes, deposed his emperor Julius Nepos in 475 AD and placed his own son, Romulus, on the throne. Concurrently, the Foederati, who were barbarian soldiers in the service of Rome, sought land within Italy as compensation for their service. Orestes refused to grant their request, prompting them to turn to Odoacer, an officer within the Roman army. Odoacer led the Foederati in a revolt against Orestes, successfully killing him before marching against Romulus. Odoacer deposed Romulus but spared his life due to the fact that the emperor was only 16 years old. Odoacer then proclaimed himself the king of Italy, dispatching the imperial insignia to the Eastern emperor, thereby signifying the end of Rome's imperial power in the West. While the barbarian invasions ultimately precipitated the downfall of the empire, the underlying causes of Rome's decline were multifaceted and complex. Rome grappled with immense challenges stemming from the colossal size of its empire. The empire reached its territorial apex in 117 AD under the reign of Emperor Trajan. With its borders stretching from Britain to Syria, this vastness presented numerous logistical and administrative problems. One such problem was the extended time it took for communication to travel from the distant frontiers to the capital, often requiring weeks or even longer. This made it difficult to effectively manage the administration of remote provinces. Furthermore, it was impractical to oversee military campaigns in regions such as Syria or Germany from a position in Italy. In response to these challenges, in 285 AD, Emperor Diocletian made the decision to divide the empire into western and eastern halves, each to be governed by a separate emperor with equal authority. This plan initially yielded short-term success, with each half being able to govern its provinces and defend its borders more effectively. However, in the long run, it proved to be a fatal blow to the Western Empire. The Western Empire gradually succumbed to bankruptcy, as the Eastern Empire encompassed the majority of the wealthy provinces. Whereas many of the Western provinces were primarily focused on agriculture and were significantly poorer, the financial resources of the Western Empire were further depleted by the constant warfare, both from external barbarian incursions and internal civil conflicts. The Western Empire found itself in a state of near-constant conflict, necessitating the maintenance of a very large and expensive army. This army placed a tremendous strain on the state's budget, leading to the postponement of infrastructure development and civil projects in favor of military expenditure. Rome's economy was also heavily reliant on slave labor. Following the expansion under Trajan, subsequent emperors adopted a more defensive posture and occasionally lost more territory than they gained. This lack of territorial expansion meant that there was no consistent influx of newly conquered peoples to be enslaved, which in turn led to a shortage of slaves to fuel the economy. This shortage caused the economy to falter, as it could no longer sustain itself. The scarcity of funds meant that the state had significantly less money to allocate to the army, resulting in a shortage of professional legionaries. Rome's army, once the envy of the ancient world, was now compelled to relax its recruitment standards in order to adequately defend its borders. Known as foederati, barbarian units were permitted to enlist in the legions, and foreign mercenaries were hired to supplement the army's ranks. These new soldiers often lacked any prior connection to Rome and possessed little loyalty to the empire. Their allegiance was primarily to their commanders, their wages, and their own people, leading many of them to betray Rome when it suited their interests. Another issue plaguing the empire was the ineffectiveness of its leadership. Many of the later emperors were remarkably out of touch with the realities of their empire, possibly due to the relocation of the capital away from Rome, first to Milan in 286 AD and later to Ravenna in 402 AD. Furthermore, succession to the throne often passed to children, resulting in a succession of incompetent emperors who had attained their positions solely by virtue of their birthright. The last emperor, Romulus Augustus, was only 16 years old when he was deposed and offered little resistance to the invading barbarian forces. The aristocracy amassed immense power due to low taxes, with some aristocrats accumulating greater wealth than the central government itself. This enabled them to effectively control weaker emperors who were desperately reliant on their financial support, leading to a situation where profit took precedence over matters of state. Given such corrupt and ineffective leadership, it is hardly surprising that the general population and many of the newly recruited barbarian soldiers harbored little faith in their rulers. It has also been argued that Christianity played a role in the decline of the empire. Christianity was legalized in 313 AD and subsequently became Rome's official religion in 380 AD. The monotheistic nature of Christianity stood in stark contrast to the Roman methods of control. When conquering new territories, the Romans frequently incorporated local gods into the state religion, allowing them to be worshipped by the local populace or equating them with existing Roman deities and merging the two. This proved to be an effective tool of Romanization, gradually integrating the newly conquered peoples into Roman society. The existence of multiple gods also enabled the Roman emperors to be worshipped as deities, and it was from this practice that they derived much of their legitimacy. The first emperor, Augustus, deified his adoptive father, Julius Caesar, and proclaimed himself to be the son of a god. However, Christianity could not accommodate this practice, leading to a significant erosion of authority for the emperors, and rendering the process of integrating new peoples far more challenging. Although the empire fell in 426 AD, Rome's legacy has endured far beyond that date. The empire managed to maintain a territorial presence through the Byzantine Empire, which kept the Roman East alive until its eventual fall to the Ottomans in 1453 AD. The empire even experienced a resurgence of sorts in the West with Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, being crowned the Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD. Roman culture has exerted a profound influence on the Western world, with numerous European languages tracing their roots back to Latin, including French, Spanish, and Italian. Rome's religion, Latin Christianity, also achieved complete dominance over the medieval West, with the Pope serving as a central figurehead for all of Europe from his seat in Rome. Roman technology and infrastructure also played a significant role in the development of Europe during the Middle Ages, with many Roman towns still retaining their importance today, such as Londinium, the predecessor to modern-day London. Thus, while the empire ultimately fell with Romulus Augustus, its influence has persisted throughout history, solidifying its position as one of the most impactful empires to have ever existed. And now, we turn our attention to the sponsor of this video, The Great Courses Plus. The Great Courses Plus offers a world of knowledge at your fingertips, accessible anytime and on any device. With a subscription, you gain access to lectures from the world's leading professors and experts, ranging from Neil deGrasse Tyson to National Geographic and the Smithsonian. A subscription grants you unlimited access to a vast library of over 10 videos encompassing lectures on art, science, math, history, business, and countless other subjects. Whether you aspire to learn how to cook, master the game of chess, or become a more accomplished photographer, The Great Courses Plus is the ideal service for you. One course that we highly recommend is entitled The Rise of Rome. This course delves into the early history of the Roman Republic, the unification of the Italian peninsula, the ascent of Julius Caesar, and much more. This comprehensive 24-part lecture series is an absolute must-watch for anyone with an interest in history, and, for a limited time, The Great Courses Plus is offering viewers of the Life Guide a free trial, so what are you waiting for? Visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/the Life Guide. Click on the link in the description and begin your free trial today.